Okay, so welcome to all of you. I'm really glad to see all of you. The topic this month is interpersonal relationships. It's a really interesting topic, and you're going to find that it contains a lot of text about all kinds of relationships, friends and family. I was saying before to Gail, there are a lot of text here. You may not get to all of them. And depending on your group, not all the participants are going to be involved in raising children or in the act of caring for parents. So it's important to be sensitive to these issues, potentially select only one or two of these relationships to explore as a group. You know your group, so do what you think is best. I'm going to go to the agenda. Is there anyone who has anything they want to share about what their group has been doing to date? Gail already shared with me a little bit. They have a huge group, an amazing group of 40 people. Is that in the daytime, Gail, the 40?
No, that's 7 to 8:30 in the evening.
Right.
Lynn is running the day program.
And I have 20 in the morning.
That's wonderful. Those are nice sized groups, and everyone gets to talk and they're enjoying it.
In my group, it's been wonderful. They've been just super participatory.
Great. That is really wonderful. I'm glad to hear it. I know I ran a group a couple of years ago, and we became so close just because of the interesting topics and the things we discussed.
Yeah.
When I did it, we actually started in January, so this was the topic that we started with. So when we do that, does anybody want to share anything about individual projects in their groups or people doing their stuff?
That's our topic for next week. We haven't really discussed it yet, but it's on the agenda for next week. So
Great. That's good. It's a challenging thing to get people to do that. So you'll have to let me know how it goes. And of course, I'm going to remind you, as usual, we have this great Facebook group, and post on it if you have anything interesting that you'd like to post. And now we will go into the themes. So when exploring texts about parents and children, keep in mind whether your participants are part of a sandwich generation, middle-aged adults who are caught between taking care of their children and taking care of their parents, people to whom I can relate. 47% of adults in their 40s and 50s fit this profile, according to the Pew Research Center, which is a nonprofit think tank. And I think depending on the ages of the children and the ages of the parents, either relationship can be pretty challenging. So some of the themes for this month are honoring parents and raising children are not simple tasks, which I think we all realize, and interpersonal relationships are complicated and involving tensions around favoritism, competition for attention, and tensions between the generations. I stumbled upon a really interesting movie. You guys may have already seen it. I saw it on Netflix called The Meyerowitz Stories. Has anybody seen that?
No, I saw a preview for it, but I haven't seen it.
It's got Dustin Hoffman as the older man.
Yeah.
What's the name of it again?
The Meyerowitz Stories.
Meyerowitz?
I think it's Meyerowitz. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. That sounds right. Let me look really quick. Oh.
Okay. So Adam Sandler is one of the sons, and what's his name? Ben Stiller is one of the sons.
Mm-hmm.
A Jewish family in New York that I could really relate to. The patriarch is a professor at Bard and a sculptor. It's a really interesting story, which speaks to exactly what we're talking about. How interpersonal relationships are complicated, and even the adult children are having competition for attention and tensions, and it's really sensitively done. And if you want to have like a supplemental something to watch that you can analyze the text we're about to see in relation to, I'd recommend it because I really enjoyed it. Did you check or should
Yes, he'll have the name correct.
Oh, excellent. Great. Okay. I'll put it in the follow-up email too. Okay. So let's look at the first text, which is called When All You Ever Wanted Isn't Enough. So before you read, think about the title of Rabbi Harold Kushner's book, When All You've Ever Wanted Isn't Enough. And give the participants a sheet of paper. Have them write 3 things they might consider all you've ever wanted. And what do these items turn out to be? Are they physical objects? Are they achievements? Are they relationships? And then when you read the text, it'll be very personal because they'll be thinking about what it was that they always wanted. So I'm going to read the text, and we can think about this while I'm reading it. I was sitting at the beach on a summer day watching 2 children, a boy and a girl, playing in the sand. They were hard at work building an elaborate sandcastle by the water's edge, with gates and towers and moats and internal passages. Just when they had nearly finished their project, a big wave came along and knocked it down, reducing it to a heap of sand. I expected the children to burst into tears, devastated by what had happened to all their hard work. But they surprised me. Instead, they ran up the shore away from the water, laughing and holding hands, and sat down to build another castle. I realized that they had taught me an important lesson. All the things in our lives, all the complicated structures we spend so much time and energy creating, are built on sand. Only our relationships to other people endure. Sooner or later, the wave will come along and knock down what we have worked so hard to build up. When that happens, only the person who has somebody's hand to hold will be able to laugh. So I think it's pretty easy to see what the message is. And one of the really nice conversations is, how has this story played out in your life? What do you base your self-worth on? Is it achievement? Because if it is, the wave can knock you down, and the person whose hand you need to hold has nothing to hold. That's something to think about with your participants. And of course, I'm always open to any questions or comments.
I just think this is so timely now with after going through the hurricanes and now the fires, and people, everything is getting literally knocked down. So it's timely message.
You're right. Actually, I was flying back. I went to the Kinesa conference in Maryland last week, and then I went to the URJ conference. But in between, I was in the airport, and there was a woman who was very early waiting for her plane. There's only one charging station, so I was sitting next to her. We were charging our phones, and we started talking. She was from Texas, and she was so cheerful. She had lost everything.
Wow.
She had lost every single thing. And she had 4 kids. They were grown kids. I mean, she was like my age. But she was so not upset. And I said, do you have insurance? She said, no. She said, I got $2,000. That's all I got.
Wow.
I was amazed at how cheerful and together she was. And I think this woman obviously knew this message. And it's really timely now. So a good message for all of us. So let's go to the next text. What do parents and children owe each other? So parent-child relationships are examined through 3 things: biblical, rabbinic, and modern texts. And they're divided into 2 categories: what parents owe their children and what children owe their parents. We'll begin with what children owe their parents. So first is a biblical text. Exodus, the 10 Commandments, and Leviticus 19:3. Okay, so you're supposed to revere your parents, honor your father and your mother, in order that your days may be prolonged on the soil that the eternal your God is giving you. And Leviticus 1, each person, his mother and father, you are to hold in awe. My Sabbaths you are to keep. I am the eternal your God. So this hold in awe, it's from the root Yod Resh Aleph. It's been translated by many as revere. But Everett Fox uses the term to hold in awe, which captures some of the subtleties of the Hebrew in the English. And this translation is used to translate both the biblical and the rabbinic passages.
Bazinga. Sorry.
That's okay. So let's look at the rabbinic understandings. Awe. Do not stand in the father's place, nor contradict his words, nor side with his opponents in a dispute. Honor. Provide the parents with food and drink, clothes and covering, and lead them in and out when they are old and need a helping hand. So Rabbi Nevins quotes Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, to note that Jewish law does not attempt to regulate the emotional side of the parent-child relationship. Awe is interpreted as the acknowledgement of parental authority, and honor is about requirements connected to their physical comfort. Love can and often does flow from a supportive environment of love, honor, and awe, but there seems to be an acknowledgement that emotions can't be dictated by laws. So humans show devotion to God through fulfillment of the commandments, with the hope that the act of engaging in mitzvot will lead to the awakening of a love for God. So it's interesting. And as our parents grow older and as we understand ourselves better as adults, it's interesting to revisit this and see exactly what our relationships are to our parents, if we still have parents, or what we remember of them. I'm fortunate in that I still have very good parents, but yes.
Is there any significance in Exodus where it says honor your father and your mother, and in Leviticus where it says the mother and his father in the order?
Yes, I'm glad you pointed that out. It's done both ways so that we know that they're equal.
Okay.
Another thing I'm going to send you, I have a cute little thing that I do with kids on gematria. The gematria for honor plus I think is twice the gematria for love. So how do you, or half of it. So how do you honor your parents? By showing them twice as much love. That's it. I'll send it to you. It's cute. You add it up. So it's just interesting to look at the relationship between love and our obligations to our parents. And now the later understandings. So scripture equates honoring parents with honoring God and cursing them with cursing God. And it says, but if a parent tells a child to break the law, the child is not obligated to do so. Proof of this is found in the Babylonian Talmud, Bava Metzia 32a. You shall each hold in awe your mother and father and keep my Sabbaths. I am God. You are all, that means you and your parents, obligated to honor me. So it's interesting that that's how it goes. We're not obligated to love our parents, only to care for them and respect them. And our relationship with God is seen very much in a similar way to our relationship with our parents. I see that there is someone else here I can invite to join in. And if anybody has anything else they would like to say, please do. Here we go. Hi, Tanya. I'm going to unmute you. There. Hi, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
So if you have anything that you want to comment on of any of these things, just feel free to jump right in, because that's where we are.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone want to talk any more about children's obligations to parents? Okay, then we'll move on to parents' obligations to children. So I'll start out by telling you there's an article in The Observant Life by Rabbi Danny Nivens, and he explains that the first obligation of parents is to provide their children with a physical and material environment that will allow them to grow up properly. There's another great link I'm going to send you that I used with my teen groups. It's about a race, and there's a coach, and he's going to blow a whistle, but and they're going to race for $100. Has anybody seen this? It's amazing. Because, okay, before I blow the whistle, if you grew up in a home with two parents, take 2 steps forward. If you grew up in a home where you never had to help your parents with the bills, take 2 steps forward. And he does this and he says, all of these things have nothing to do with you. It's not your fault if you don't have these steps upwards to help you get ahead. But it's easier to run the race if you start from here than if you start from there. And so that very much speaks to the obligation of parents towards their children. Once parents move beyond feeding, sheltering, and clothing their children, they're obligated to guide their children to develop good character. So Rabbi Nivens goes on to say that the goal of Jewish parents is to raise children to adulthood by teaching them to sanctify life and to serve as God's partners in perfecting the world. He reminds the reader that children don't move towards this goal on a single path or in a straight line. I'm pretty sure we all know that. Instead, parents need to help each individual child to discover their own unique interests and develop the skills that will allow them to contribute most richly to the world around them. So let's start by looking at the biblical text. Train a child in the way that he ought to go. He will not swerve from it even in old age. So biblical understandings point out how important the household is to the development of children, just as we were talking modern as well. There's also a quote attributed to Aristotle, and often attributed to as a Jesuit model. Give me a child until he is 7, and I will give you the man. It has also been observed that troubled children very often come from troubled homes, so the biblical text is still very relevant. And that's something to think about, which makes this biblical text very modern. Then we look at rabbinic understandings. The parents are bound to welcome the child into the Jewish people, teach him or her Torah, help him or her find a spouse, and teach him or her a livelihood. And some say teach him or her to swim too. What is the reason? his life may depend upon it. The other one is, I found a fruitful world because my ancestors planted it for me. So too will I plant for my children. And I think we all know that's from the Honi story, which we always tell on Tu B'Shvat. So the Talmud reflects that the fact that traditionally the commandments for child rearing were seen as an obligation for the father. I changed it to parents here. In modern times, the obligations outlined in our traditional sources are seen as the responsibility of both the father and mother to a child of any gender. Okay, and then later understandings, if you truly wish your children to study Torah, study it yourself in their presence. You will follow your example. Otherwise, they will not themselves study Torah, but will simply instruct their children to do so, because that's what you're modeling for them. And that reminds me of the Harry Chapin song, Cats in the Cradle. You know, the father asks his son to join. First, the son asks the father to join him in all his childhood activities. And the father promises he's going to, but he never does. And the son is disappointed, but he accepts the excuses. And he wants to be just like his dad. And later, the final two verses reverse the roles. The father calls his son and invites him for a visit. But the son has his own issues with his job, and his children are sick with the flu. He tells his father that he will visit him if he can find the time. So the final two lines of the song reflect the father's realization of what has happened, which is, and as I hung up the phone, it occurred to me he'd grown up just like me. My boy was just like me. So that's true of everything. And I think as our children get older and grow, we can see our influence on them, sometimes in good ways and sometimes in less good ways. But it's always very interesting to see it. I watched my older daughter become a mother, and she's so much the way I was. It's just fun to watch. And my youngest daughter has just started in Jewish education. She's writing curriculum materials. And she sent me a text and she wrote, "Yeah, I'm turning into my mother." So it's kind of fun.
Nice honors.
Yeah. Well, this is a girl with a lot of tattoos and blue hair. So you see that she's come back to it. So that's kind of nice. Anyway, so let's see what else parents are obligated to do to their children. So going back to the Kedushin text from the Babylonian Talmud, you can ask your participants, how do we continue these practices in modern times to perpetuate the legacy intended with each obligation? So in other words, we find a more modern interpretation of these. So entering the covenant, whether the Brit Milah or the ceremony, which is obviously the ceremony for a boy, or simply Brit, a naming ceremony for a girl, the obligation to formally bring the child into the covenant signifies that the infant is part of a greater whole and purpose, including contributing to the Jewish people. So that's what that one means. To redeem is to concretize historical conscience. In other words, the Pidyon, which is the firstborn, is only performed for a male, but
Did you have a meeting today?
I want to go get something.
rituals that
Where are you going to do that?
I want to get
don't want to turn off their sound.
Where are you going to do that?
Okay. Okay, so, but the idea is that we're connecting our children to our greater community. Then we are also to teach Torah, to transmit Judaism. Parents are obligated to concern themselves with the intellectual and spiritual growth of the Jewish people and to passing on this inheritance to their children. Take away if a spouse, a partner, just companionship, either companionship or propagation. But Judaism asserts that human beings need each other. They need other human beings in their lives, and it advocates for a life of community rather than seclusion. On the other hand, Judaism also teaches, Judaism also teaches, is your thing moving all around or is that just me?
Just you.
Oh, good. Okay. That's good. I'll sit very still. I don't know what's going on. But it teaches the importance of contributing to the growth of the Jewish people. And it can be literal, like you should have children, or raising children in our homes, whether we gave birth to them or not, or more broadly, contributing in other ways to the growth of the community. All of those things are part of the same transmitting our Judaism. Okay, so teach a craft. There's a commitment to teach our children to be independent and to have life-sustaining skills, which is why we tell them they have to learn how to swim as well. And that's the last one, learn to swim, which is also means protection. Another important value in Judaism is pikuach nefesh, literally saving a soul, but often understood as saving a life. So this commandment begins with giving our children the life skills they'll need in order to keep themselves from harm's way and the threats of the world that may emerge as children assert greater independence. I think in light of all those studies on millennials that we've had recently, it might be swinging a little too much this way. I mean, I read articles about parents who go on job interviews with their children. That's not part of this. That's too much. At some point, children have to be able to do these skills on their own. We're trying to teach them to become independent and to be able to function in the world. And I think that's also an interesting comment on today. Any comments or questions? Okay, well, then we can go on to friendship. So Ruth and Naomi is one of the amazing models of friendship. Adele Reinhardt, in the introduction to the book of Ruth in the Jewish Study Bible, points out that the story of Ruth is a story of the move from emptiness to fulfillment. The theme is expressed in two spheres, the agricultural and the personal, as the characters move from a place of famine and loss to a land of bounty, marriage, and the birth of a child who is ultimately traced to King David. Love and loyalty expressed through the relationship between Ruth and Naomi is the most positive biblical portrayal of women's relationships. So the very famous words that Ruth says to Naomi, when Naomi urges her to return to her people and her gods, she says, "Do not urge me to leave you, to turn back and not follow you. For wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. And more may the eternal do to me, if anything but death parts me from you." So she's a very, very loyal person. From this story, we can draw upon the elements that are the foundation of friendship. Ruth's story is touching and it's noble. It speaks to the centrality of chesed, meaning fidelity, loyalty, reliability, stability, trustworthiness. Ruth binds herself to Naomi, binds herself to a people, and through her acts of kindness as well as courage, she begins an example of decency and vision. And I think you know that we consider Ruth to be the first convert to Judaism. And many women, when they convert to Judaism, they'll take on the name Ruth as their Hebrew name because of this. So, based on this pledge and the rest of the story of Ruth, she gets married to Boaz, and she's the ancestors. She's a mother in the line of ancestry that leads to King David. So she's a very wonderful example of loyalty. Is there anyone who'd like to comment? If you have a group mostly made of women, this could be an interesting topic. Also, last time I was discussing this, people were wondering whether women's friendships were different from men's friendships and in which way they were different. So if that's a topic anyone discusses with their group when you do this, I'd love to get some feedback and find out. A lot of times I'll meet someone, like we'll be talking, and then I'll say to my husband, yeah, she has 3 kids, they live here, there, and there. Here's what, like all the stuff that's important to us, we'll get it right out there. My husband's like, how do you get that? Like all we, identify was like we both drive cars. It's like, so, it'd be interesting.
What kind of beer do you like?
Right. Yeah.
I don't even think they ask that. I really don't think they ask anything.
I don't know what they're talking about. Maybe politics, but I don't know. But I know that women get right down very often. Like this woman I met in the airport. We talked like 25 minutes. I knew every single one of her children. I knew about her grandchildren. I knew all kinds of stuff. And I knew about that she lost her house, and she was a remarkable role model.
Yeah.
Anyway, the next is a friendship between some boys, David and Jonathan. So in the Jewish Study Bible, Shimon Bar Ephrat notes in his introduction to the book of Samuel that the first book of Samuel consists of narratives whose external concern is with the personal lives of the leaders portrayed in the text. Their dreams, feelings, and desires are depicted realistically, describing both the negative and positive qualities of the leader. That's actually one of the things I love about David, because he's not perfect. And it's interesting to read about him. So in this text we study, this is where David has just slayed the giant Goliath, and King Saul asks his military general to summon the boy who killed the Philistine. And the narrative picks up following David identifying himself to King Saul as the son of Jesse the Bethlehemite. So here we have the beginning of the story of one of the greatest friendships in the Bible. The friendship of Jonathan, who's King Saul's son, and David, who becomes a future king of Israel. Right there is a good rivalry, but they weren't. They were such good friends. It's important to recall that throughout the book, Saul is depicted as an unstable character who was ultimately not suitable to be the king of Israel. On the other hand, David is portrayed in a very positive light, with many talents and great strength. He's depicted as respectful and loyal to Saul, and even when he sins, we see him engaging in full repentance. So when the teens do this, we talk about when Jonathan warns David that Saul wants to kill him. When is it, and in the light of the 10 Commandments that we just read, do you think he did the right thing? When is it right to side with your family, and when is it right to side with your friends? And how do you make that decision? So Saul urged his son Jonathan and all his courtiers to kill David. But Saul's son Jonathan was very fond of David. And Jonathan told David, "My father Saul is bent on killing you. Be on your guard tomorrow morning. Get to a secret place and remain in hiding. I will go out and stand next to my father in the field where you will be, and I will speak to my father about you. If I learn anything, I will tell you." So Jonathan spoke well of David to his father Saul. He said to him, "Let not your majesty wrong his servant David, for he has not wronged you. Indeed, all his actions have been very much to your advantage." Saul heeded Jonathan's plea, and Saul swore, "As the Eternal lives, he shall not be put to death." Jonathan called David, and Jonathan told him all this. Then Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he served him as before. So if you remember, Saul was jealous of David. So that's another complication to this relationship that's kind of interesting. Does anyone have a comment or a question here? So in relation to what we just studied about what children owe their parents, what side of this do you come down on? Well, I'll tell you what I think. So if your father is going to break a law, you don't have to break that law, right? So it's definitely against the law to kill someone. So in that sense, I think David was right. Jonathan was right. And he spoke to his father. So I tend to side with Jonathan. However, I also feel like I don't know all of the stories. Like maybe David was a bad influence on Jonathan. I don't know. It's complicated, but I think it can make a really good discussion. So I'm going to throw that out. Does anybody want to say anything or?
Do you have a suggestion as far, it's quite a long text here, as far as breaking that up or getting do you suggest that we take turns reading the text?
I would take turns reading the text, and if you found that you have enough that you feel like you've got the gist of it, I don't think you have to focus on every word. See how patient your participants are, because I really feel that conversation is such a great one that you can have, that it's not necessary to read every word of it, as long as you know the people. But then again, there are subtleties in there that people might want to single out. So I would suggest reading the whole thing and getting a feel for your group and seeing what they do with it. It's certainly not written in stone that you have to read every word, but maybe also beforehand, just look it over and see what jumps out to you. And you never know what's going to jump out to someone else. So that is Jonathan and David. Let's go ahead to rabbinic understandings of friendship. Okay. So the first quote you see on the screen is very famous, probably because it's straightforward and it's very good advice. As you know, it's much easier to succeed when you have a support system. I'm sure you've all heard of this. Joshua ben Pariah says, "Set up a master, a Rav, for yourself, and acquire for yourself a friend or a companion or disciple, a chaver, and give everybody the benefit of the doubt. And give everybody the benefit of the doubt is a good one too, because a lot of times people will jump to conclusions and they'll act as if something that's not true is already true, and that's a good way to destroy a friendship. So give everybody the benefit of the doubt. The next quote is very long, and only part of it is on the screen. What I did was what you were asking about. I took the part that I thought was most important that I wanted to share with you. And where do we hear that when the companion corrects the other and studies together that they are well rewarded for their labor? It is said, two are better than one because they have a good reward for their labor. So that in itself is a good thing to talk about. But I could go longer. Acquire for yourself a friend or companion. This teaches that a person should acquire for him or herself a friend or a companion, a person with whom to eat, with whom to drink, and with whom to study scripture, with whom to study Mishnah, with whom to sleep in the same house, and with whom to reveal all of the person's secrets, the secrets of the Torah. And you can see what you think of these secrets. They're secrets of the Torah, like methods and principles of logical reasoning, and the secrets of derech eretz, which means the ways of the world, common decency, and the way things work. When the two sit studying Torah, and one of them makes a mistake in the matter of law, the other one is required, by the way, to correct them. The friend companion will correct the other. And where do we hear that when the companion corrects the other and studies together that they are well rewarded for their labor? It is said in Ecclesiastes, two are better than one because they have a good reward for their labor. So in other words, the reward for your labor is that you've learned something. I think we talked about Tochacha last week. It's not always easy to correct someone. But I think people know if you correct them respectfully, that you're doing something that's not easy to do and that you really care about them. At least that's what I tell my kids. Okay, so then the bottom two texts here. Rabbi Eliezer says, let the respect owing to your companion be as precious to you as the respect owing to yourself. And Rabbi Yossi says, let your fellow's money be as precious to you as your own. That's from Pirkei Avot, both of these. So what do these two texts have in common? Does anybody want to venture?
That you should treat other people the way you want to be treated.
Exactly, which we all know standing on one foot is the whole point of the Torah. And the thing here is respect. It's really important. The rabbis are saying that respect builds trust, which is like the story of David and Jonathan. Jonathan loved David as he loved himself. So it's the same value that as what's talked about here in Pirkei Avot, when you say, let your money be as precious as your own. So a really good friend, someone who's a really good friend, will respect you the way they respect themselves. They'll treat you the way they'd want to be treated. And that's always a very good thing to know. So this is rabbinic. Let's look at modern understandings of friendship. And let's compare them to what we just read. This is the final text. It comes from the book Restful Reflections by Rabbi Karioliski and Rabbi Lori Foreman, and it was published in 2001. It includes Jewish quotes and personal modern reflections on the sources that we were reading. So they say, during our lifetime, we acquire many kinds of friends. In each of them, we may encounter a bit of the divine. They are angels sent by God with a particular mission, sent by the Holy One of Blessing to teach us something. We have friends that we know from childhood and other friends from college. We have friends from the community involvement and from friends from work. Yet the one true friend is a friend who loves unconditionally. This is the person who goes out of his or her way to be there for us. This is a friend whom we call upon in moments of crisis and know that he or she will drop everything and come running. This is the friend who always makes time to listen to our concerns, our dreams, and even our complaints. So it might be interesting to think about who is your friend like this, and are you a friend like this? So how is Rabbi Foreman's definition of friendship similar to or different from the friendships described in the Bible and the rabbinic texts? And how does it compare with your definition of friendship? So I'm going to get the conversation going a little. This was definitely my definition of friendship when I was younger. In high school, I definitely would have died for any of my friends, and they would have died for me. I think as we get older and we have more demands upon us, I almost feel like, how could I even ask that of someone? I do have very good friends and very old friends, and I certainly would do what I could for them. I also would want them to understand if I can't because of something. So I don't know if that's modern or if that's age or if I just became like not as nice as I used to be. But it would be interesting to see what you feel about it and what the people in your groups think about it. So I'll just put that out there. For example, I have a friend who she'll do anything for me, and she's like, my sister passed away, and she's my new sister. We've been friends for like 25 years or more, and there's certain things I just wouldn't ask her to do though, because I know she's got her own stuff. So that's kind of what I mean. I think she would do them if I asked her to though, and I would for her too. Anyway, so that is. I'm open to any discussions, but if you would rather not, I can go into the supplemental materials. Okay, supplemental materials. These are really good. The Secrets to a Happy Life from a Harvard study reported in the New York Times. It reveals that strong social networks are the best predictors of a longer lifespan and happiness, more than money and more than fame. I think we know that fame is not a great way to live a long life, but networks, being connected to people, is the biggest predictor of if you're going to live a long time. Okay, this is a nice one. Parent is a verb, our adult children. It's by Anita Silvert, who used to work for Chai Mitzvah. She addresses the topic of how we create friendships with our children and sustain them long after we have any meaningful control over the details of their lives. And it's done with humor. It's done very nicely. I think you'd enjoy it. Okay, excerpt from The Blessing of a Skinned Knee, Discovering Your Unique and Ordinary Child. And this is great. Have any of you read this book?
I have not.
People look at it, especially in light of how overprotected many of the kids nowadays are. So the sages advise us to study Torah Lishma, Torah for its own sake, rather to impress others with our scholarship. And a paradox of parenting is that if we love our children for their own sake rather than for their achievements, it's more likely that they'll reach their true potential. So there are a lot of parents. When I wrote the family ed for Chai Mitzvah a couple of years ago, I went back and taught in the classroom because I wanted to see how modern parents and families worked, and it made me so nervous. I had little kids, so much was expected of these kids, and their parents were so uptight. They had to achieve. Even I taught third grade. It was Martin Luther King, and I said, actually where I taught, the rabbi there, the congregation was in Livingston, but originally from Newark. And the old rabbi actually is the person who introduced Martin Luther King with his famous speech. So I showed them this video, and I said, what do you think? And this little boy, he's 7 years old, he raises his hand, he goes, I'm reading a book on the civil rights movement. Seven? Like, they're expected to do so much stuff there.
Huh.
So I think that's something to keep in mind, and this is a really good book, The Blessing of a Skinned Knee, that you should let your children deal with things a little bit. Like, be there to support them, but don't do it for them, and don't hover like helicopter parents do. And I'm not saying that I was never guilty of this, but I think I might have learned a little bit. Then teen friendships in the digital age from the Pew Research Center. Also very interesting. I was at a teen symposium, and some of the stuff that they reported was so interesting. From measuring teens' internet usage to finding out what devices they own, Pew Research Center has been examining the digital lives of teenagers for over a decade. The latest report focuses on how teens, who often lead tech-saturated lives, develop and sustain friendship in the digital age, including where they meet, communicate, and spend time with friends. I'm sure you've all seen kids sitting in an ice cream place, instead of talking to each other, they're all talking on their phones. I did discover, though, that when my kids were doing that, they just didn't want me to hear what they were saying, so they texted their friends. Mm-hmm. So no, but it is true, they have so little time that they're not being hovered over. And I think they find their internet time is their only time where they're themselves. I don't know, it's an interesting study, you should read it. And then 6 lessons for the sandwich generation. How to manage your parents, your kids, and your sanity.
Mm-hmm.
As a member of the sandwich generation, Charles Passy has come to realize that his daily burden is also a daily reminder of how blessed he truly is. And that is definitely something I need to remind myself, and you may also at times. So we're open to any questions or any comments.
Do you recommend, is there a YouTube video on any of those? When we ran our session on, you know, putting things in order that are important in life, we showed that video about kidney donation. It was, I think, about a 15-minute video, and it was really impactful. I mean, I really loved having a short video that triggered a lot of conversation. I just wondered if, was there anything in there that
Yes. So, all of these supplemental materials are really good. I think that they're a little bit long, possibly for a session. You might want to recommend them to people from home. But I would strongly recommend, if you're doing what children owe their parents, what parents owe their children, I'm going to send you a link to this short video about the race, because I think it's very meaningful.
right?
I like that idea.
Yeah. And if you find other things, or if you use these and you want to tell me how they worked for you, I'm sure it'll be interesting for both everybody on the webinar and everyone else to find out. I think that, you know, just like the text is a good jumping off point, sometimes the video is a great jumping off point too. So I'm going to send a link. I'm going to remind you about the Meyerowitz stories, which is not for your session, but could be something people want to watch either before or after. I'll send you the link to the race video. What else did I say I was going to send? Is that it?
I think those were the two things.
Good. So I'll send those in addition to all the other follow-ups that we usually have. And I'll be really interested to see how everything goes.
Sounds good.
Great. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Okay. Talk to you next time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.